Hey everyone, Mr. Wineland here as we are starting chapter 2 in Oklahoma history. Woohoo! Let's get through this. There is a lot of material to write down, so I'll do my best to go as slow as I can. But just be ready to look for things in blue this time. But we're going to go through, we're going to talk about the earliest peoples found in Oklahoma, as far as we know, based on what has been discovered by scientists. And so we're going to kind of go into that in some of the cultures that we may have seen in Oklahoma. So it's pretty interesting to kind of see where we've come in this part of the world at this time. We have to understand that a lot of the things we know about our history is because it's been written down, but some of it we don't know. And a lot of that is known as prehistoric history. So, or prehistoric era, I should say. This is the answer number one, prehistoric. And then what this is referring to is the period before writing. When we had records, we had an identity of what was going on. So, how did these individuals become who they were based on their culture? We found that out because they left records, and records that we could actually read and transfer into language that we understood. And so basically, we were able to kind of know their culture. But there's been a lot of cultures where they may have left stuff behind, but we can't translate it. And so we don't know about them, or there was, no language at all. So what we have to understand is that a lot of this evidence is based on certain artifacts that they found. We're going to learn more about that. But the first prehistoric people we believe may have been millions of years ago. Now, listen, it's not 100% fact. I think we have to be very careful about how we go about presenting this stuff. So know that you have to kind of determine this yourself. But there are certain truths and facts that have allowed us to make these certain determinations. We do know that probably the first people in America were sometime right around 12,000 to 25,000 years ago. Um, what we know is a lot of this information, it was gathered by archaeologists. These were scientists who studied ancient cultures by examining artifacts, remains left behind. So some of these things, a lot of these things came from what is known as a median. And basically, this is like an ancient garbage dump. So, kind of basically there to help them understand the study, basically. So that's really what a median is. It's just really just kind of where they find all these things. And so here you go. Here's your answer number 8, by the way, in your definition to artifact and petroglyphs here. Some of the things that they might find, the scientists might find, is what they call artifacts. And these can be anything. Yes, they can be people, but really what they are is more the things that people use or, have used in their culture. So these could be things like pottery, tools, a bone, a jewelry, paintings. These are things that they can tell that they made this and they used it. And then a lot of times they have to look at certain items and go, okay, why is this here? So if there's this pot, what did they use it for? And there's luckily some different types of tests that can determine those things. But sometimes those tests aren't accurate, and so sometimes they have to kind of look at the detail and really kind of figure it out on their own and piece things together. Now, the good thing is that there have been other cultures that they've been clearly able to identify, and a lot of that has due to record keeping. So it has kind of given them a hint. But sometimes, it's really up to them to figure out. Petroglyphs are basically pictures or symbols. So like the peace symbol, or the thumbs up symbol. Hey, look, they might have drawn a picture of a hand. Oh, I'll use my other hand. So, like a hand might have been on the cave or something. Even though it's a hand, it represents something. What? We don't know. So that's something that they still have to kind of figure out. But these are artifacts that are found. And so hopefully you've written these definitions down. But these have been found either in the ground or they've been in a waterway. Either way, they've been found, and they've been, kind of deciphered. Archaeological dig is known as an excavation. A lot of times, most of these digs are not by accident. I know sometimes people think, oh, I'm just going to go dig over here and I'm going to find something. That's not how it works. Usually what they figure out is, through certain other records about certain cultures or other things that have been found, they they've been able to kind of get a sense of where something ancient may have occurred. So usually that's how it starts out. But yes, sometimes they are going, hey, like there's been rumors of an ancient culture here. We're just going to search in this area. Not saying that doesn't happen, but most of the time it's very much more calculated than that. They have kind of a little bit more hints and guesses and opportunity to get that research so they can know for sure, like, oh, we're not wasting our time here. But your definition of archaeologist is right here. They study and document any fragment of an artifact discovered. The idea of the archaeologist is to find those, document what they found, so that anthropologists can study these cultures and help the archaeologists go, hey, you found this, and this is really important and why. So, and they help piece together certain artifacts and details. A lot of this is due to fossils, and fossils are but traces, remains of living things, animals, birds, people. Most common fossils are teeth, bones, or shells. Carbon dating has definitely helped with the aging process. They've been able to kind of figure out, based on the carbon dating, certain number of carbon can determine how old something is. Excuse me. Goodness, I don't know why I'm yawning. But anyway, the carbon dating does help in that aspect with any organic matter. So when you're searching for the clues, they use a lot of different types of studies: DNA testing, fluorine dating. Then there's dendrochronology, which is basically determining the age of an artifact using kind of looking at the rings of something. Sometimes this is mostly used for trees, counting up the rings. You can also do that with certain living animal or former living animals. I guess some of the bones as well may have some ways to count up the age. So fossil pollen has also been helping with plants, discovering old plants. Historical overlap, though, from time to time, you're going to get some overlap of, oh, well, this existed at this time, but it also lasted in this time. So that has been helpful over the years. Got a lot here on this slide, so do what I can. Some of the earliest peoples that we know came from Asia. So a lot of them may have traveled from Russia and into with his Canada/Alaska and made their way down into North America, South America. Now, and a lot of you are going, hey, Mr. Wineland, there's a thing called the Pacific Ocean there. How would they cross the Pacific Ocean? Well, I'll tell you something. It's called the Bering Strait. And this is the Bering Strait. If we look at this picture here, I'm going to try to increase it a little bit. So you can see here in this, there is Asia. So at one point in time, they traveled from Africa, the Middle East, made their way into Asia, and then during the time of the Ice Age, you saw that a lot of this water was freezing up, and instead of just going, just kind of staying solid like a flat surface, it was kind of forming into these glaciers, and then that exposed some land, and possibly that land was connected to what is Alaska and Russia, and this Bering Strait land bridge is what they crossed and then finally made their way into North America. So that is what a lot of scientists believe, and it makes sense. So eventually, warming periods would occur, and so eventually that ice would melt. But before that, when they were glaciers exposing that land, that crossed them over. Over 16,000 prehistoric and early American Indian sites are in Oklahoma. But we do believe that a lot of them, again, like I said, a lot of these Native American tribes that we know our that are in our state may have originated from Asia. So again, your answer number 9 is Asia. Bering Strait, land bridge between Siberia and Alaska is 2. Excuse me. Number 3 is right up here. We're going to talk about the Paleo period and what that means. So we're kind of going to get into a little bit about the early Native American tribes and how they formed. So the Paleo period might have began with the ice glaciers, and eventually forming into different other natives, Native American sites. So and so we're going to talk about these paleo Native Americans and how they were successful in their time. Um, so they were nomadic people, which is your definition, wandering from place to place. They were big game hunters who followed animals for their food source deep into America, which is answer number four. Um, so, in 1961, a lot of scientists have studied a lot of Paleo Indian hunters in Oklahoma. What they have also found is the Columbia mammoth bones found at the Cooperton site in Kiowa County. Also, we see that the mastodons lived during this time. Mammoths, camels, bison found here. Um, we also have different forms of the Paleo Indians. We have different types of overlapping cultures within the Paleo Indians. One of them is number 13 is Clovis people. The Clovis people were named after New Mexico site of their first artifacts. Known for their spears, spear point usually 3 to 4 inches long. Important Clovis site is near Stecker in Cato County. First hunted mammoths, then switched to bison. So part number 3 as well. We see we see that the Folsom people are also another culture, part of number 13. The Folsom people is a site near Cooper, Bone Bed, and Waugh sites. This is where they found a lot of different types of spear points that help kind of determine. This was in Harper County, which is in number 12. And then Dalton is also another answer, number 13. People lived some 9,000, 10,000 years ago, skilled in clothing, containers, tools, covers, and shelters. Let me show you some of these spear points. This is what we're talking about. So here are your examples. The one of the Clovis people is right here on the left. A lot longer, sharper, looks like. The one to the right is more the Folsom, Folsom people. As it's, a little bit finer, still sharp, but it's not as long as this one. But these are some of the spear points that we're talking about. We got your answer to number 6 up here, archaic culture foragers. We do know that a lot of the earliest peoples were hunters and harvesters. A lot of them didn't know how to farm at this point in time. So the only way to survive was to basically go for your own food. They would follow certain herds of animals, hunt them, and eventually kill them for them food. And then as they traveled, they would gather other wild plants and eat them. With some of those plants, they're able to make flowers, short baskets. Yawning. Pieces of bone and antler became spear points, needles, awls, punches, and adalat hooks came from the archaic foragers. And so, what we're talking about these individuals is these individuals right here. You can see right here the adlatal. Sorry, it's the adlatal. It's just basically the stick, but you have this like spear that has like this little I guess loop around it, and you kind of just twirl it around and then fling it, and it would kind of be able to stab and puncture one of the animals. The woodland culture, answer number 14. About 2,000 years ago, the woodland culture emerged, planted, cultivated, and harvested. This is where we start to see our first set of farmers around this time. Some of our first farms around Grand River area, the Washita Mountains, Cimarron River area, along the Canadian Washita rivers. Bow and arrow may have been invented, which is the reason why you have number 14. They may have been the first ones to use the bow and arrow. So we're starting to see that over time, an advancement in these cultures and really starting to become a lot more knowledgeable about the world and being a lot more successful. We have the Plains Village farmers lived in Oklahoma from about 1,200 to 500 years ago, grew corn, beans, squash, gourds, sunflowers, and tobacco. They may have hunted bison and deer as well. Also, hickory nuts were collected, walnuts, hackberry seed, wild cherries, plums, persimmons, and others. The mound builders, they built the spiral mounds used for housing, burials, and temples various historical grounds, lived in small farm villages. Spiral men and women, they would paint themselves in colorful paints, fine craftsmen, mostly with stone and shell and copper. And then finally, we have our early Plains Indians. Um, this is going right around not too long, over 500 years ago. Um, they or no, I'm sorry, yeah, actually, you know what, we're actually more like 1,000 years ago, but they resorted more to a nomadic way of life, and then ultimately we start to see that these are also individuals from our current, or from what we know from the 1800s or 1700s into the 1800s. Some of our early Native American tribes here in our state, a lot of these individuals resorted back to nomadic way because that's what they knew. Also, it got to a point in time where farming was just not their way of life anymore. They would hunt the buffalo, the deer, the antelope, rabbit, whatever they could find. The buffalo was kind of their life source, their food. They used different parts of the body for other things. They foraged wild plant foods, lived in grass houses, and may have been ancestors to the Wichitas. So this is what we kind of know from these individuals several years ago. But we can also see here, this is also some of the mound builders, some of the mounds that they may have built. This is how they may have dressed at the time as well, from what we know. But very early times in Native American culture. But that's going to do it for this lesson. I hope you learned a lot. We'll catch you next time when we get to section 2.